Of course, we know what all these things is all about. It's about the truncation of democracy in these countries and the issues arising out of that. And of course, you know, when the coup took place on July 26 in Niger, and the president or former president of the country, Mohamed Bazoum, was ousted, ECOWAS ramped up its condemnation of what happened in Niger, because it happened in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and it's like it's going to be a kind of spiral effect. So they took the actions in Niger, which is to say that, look, we are going to, you know, apply some sanctions to Niger to show our displeasure at what is happening in that area, not just in Niger, but what has happened before Niger. And now, of course, between that time and now, quite a lot of things have happened. We have lapsed into a dangerous stalemate, whereby, you know, ECOWAS pronouncements on restoring democracy in Niger and even in Mali and Burkina Faso has gone unheeded. And so between that time and now, a lot of things have happened, dangerous things have happened, which, you know, requires the ECOWAS heads of state to sit down and review the situation and look at what options to take. For instance, we know, for instance, now that, you know, the three countries, that's Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have, you know, gone ahead to try to form a kind of, you know, a union or a confederation whereby the three of them will come together and form some kind of alliance of Sahel states, that's what they call it. And afterwards, they will now begin to form a confederation on economic, diplomatic, and military matters. Now, that is the dangerous escalation we have. And we've also have a situation whereby in these countries, there have been, you know, a lot of happenings that tend towards, you know, challenge to the military authorities there. In Niger, for instance, we have credible intelligence or credible reports that it is now a matter of regime protection rather than national protection. And by that I mean they have, you know, sort of withdrawn all the soldiers that are supposed to fight and protect the country, you know, to protect the regime in Niamey. So what you have now is a situation where the military junta in Niger and much also in Mali and Burkina Faso are more interested in protecting themselves than facing up to the dangers that this country faces from insurgent groups like ISIS and the rest of them. So it's actually the dangerous stalemate that we have, because ECOWAS made pronouncements to the effect that they would like to see a restoration of democracy in these countries. And because it has not followed, so to speak, its pronouncements, it has given rise to a number of issues that have become dangerous to the sub-region. You can, I recall, for instance, recently there was a coup attempt in Sierra Leone, another coup attempt in Guinea-Bissau. So these are issues that really the ECOWAS summit, I keep saying ECOWAS summit would look at and review and realize what to do from here. Because if we allow it to go on, it could escalate into a situation where ECOWAS itself might not be able to cope with. So this is the time that we need to take a decisive stand on what to do in these three countries. Otherwise, we may just find ourselves in situations that that would be very dangerous for the sub-region and even for the states themselves. So this is something that I think would engage the attention of the ECOWAS heads of state, and they better do something about it before it gets out of hand.
Okay, Mr. Eliasu, I'm just going to show you something. If you look at how these countries, times that, you know, the military junta started, the coup d'etat was started. For example, Mali was in 2020, Guinea was in 2021, Burkina Faso was in 2022, Niger 2023, Gabon 2023. And you now have Sierra Leone almost succeeded in 2023 as well. And Guinea-Bissau, the two also joined in 2023, but they didn't succeed. Now, if you look at all these countries, there seems to be like an alliance between them. That's what we talk about, a Sahel alliance. And of course, they have formed forces joined together. That means that these countries are finding solace in one part. Now, ECOWAS, on the other part, says that put sanctions on this country for them to come back into democracy, or they should return the elected president. So my question is, how do, on one hand, ECOWAS is giving sanctions, telling this other hand that come back, but this other hand is already with the other forces, the Sahel forces. How do they want to, how does that correlate? What exactly is ECOWAS going to be doing to, maybe to reduce the sanctions, or how do this really would work?
Well, we all know what happened when the military coup took place in Niger. ECOWAS, under the aegis of Nigeria, which our president became the chairman of the ECOWAS Council of Heads of States, some sanctions were slapped on Niger, mainly the cutting off of electricity and the closing of the border to stop movement of goods, movement of services, movement of people, effectively to cut off Niger and to ensure that Niger feels the heat of the sanctions. But again, having done that, nothing, very few credible steps were taken. By credible, I mean, yeah, there was a threat of a military intervention to restore democracy in Niger, but then there were no details spelled out on how these actions were going to take place. Apart from the cutting off of electricity supplies to Niger and the closure of the border, nothing concrete in terms of follow-up was done. And then the regime, dug in. We allowed the regime to dig in, and then to ensure that it made it difficult for ECOMOG to try and see even if they are going to use the military option to make it difficult for ECOMOG. They sort of dug in. ECOWAS, sorry, I keep saying ECOMOG. So right now, because of lack of follow-up in terms of credible efforts, diplomatic, and even follow-up on the pronouncement made. I don't want to use the word threat. On the pronouncement made, so the regime found itself, in a situation whereby it had all the aces, and then at the end of the day, it dug in, and it's holding the people of Niger hostage in the fact that, in the sense that, it now took care of the military situation, and then ensured that the people out there are not, involved in the decision making. The decision making to protect the country under the aegis of the democratic principles, but the whims and caprices of the regime. So they have dug in now, and they're even doing their own counter diplomatic measures. Some of the countries, for instance, are now, the three countries have now come together to try to form a military alliance and to state that whatever happens to any of them would be would also attract the action from the two others. So effectively making themselves a bulwark against whatever military action that will be taken by ECOWAS. And also there has been a heightened cooperation and collaboration between them economically, militarily, and strategically. Now, ECOMOG has monitored all this. ECOWAS has monitored all this development without going into the next step. Now, if we want to embark on a military action to remove this government or these juntas and then restore democracy, what are the details? How are we going? What are the forces? What are the assets we are going to deploy to ensure that this action is carried out? In the meantime, they have found a way of sidetracking the sanctions on them. They have now found that they have now made themselves comfortable at the expense of the people that are suffering from the sanctions. So, well, in the case of Niger, the president, Abdurrahman Chiani, transferred his family to Dubai. And some of his cronies did the same thing. So they have taken care of themselves, and then they are not bothered about what will happen to the people, because already they are, they are taking care of their families. They are taking care of their own immediate comfort, to the detriment of the people. Now, Ecowas has made pronouncement to the effect that it was going to intervene. We have not seen anything to that effect. I mean, any credible move towards that effect. And that has allowed the junta or the juntas to take the initiative. We also hear that they are actually, making moves into some of the major ECOWAS countries, trying to influence public opinion. In effect, trying to create a psychological atmosphere in some of these countries that will be sympathetic to them and to their stay there. But they have not come out to tell the whole world what they intend to do in terms of what is required of them, in terms of, restoring democracy. And in the case of Niger, in terms of releasing President Bazoum. So ECOWAS is in a bind now to intervene or not to intervene. If you are going to intervene, how are you going to intervene? Are you going to go all out for a military assault on the junta, or are you going to seek other means? This has not been spelled out. And in the middle of all this, we see a dangerous stalemate. And this stalemate must not be allowed, because now they are emboldened. They are trying to take countermeasures to try to see how they could put pressure on ECOWAS, so that ECOWAS would not continue to put pressure on them to be able to restore democracy, which is the principal demand on this military government. And if you don't do something about it, we risk having the military interventions in this country to become a cancerous tumor in West Africa, in the sub-region. And you can see what has happened in Sierra Leone. Hello?
Yeah. Okay, let me jump in here. You say necessary measures need to be taken into consideration. That's why I asked the question. If ECOWAS is saying that come back to democracy, or you are also putting restrictions, obviously when you come back to democracy, we'll lift up the restrictions. So what happens to the agreements that those countries have made with the other party? What happens? Are they going to also forfeit it, or they are going to go ahead with it? To answer, so when you answer that question, my next question is, what has the dynamic of this? What has it done to the to the diplomatic relation between ECOWAS countries?
Well, definitely at this point in time, the diplomatic relations between them has lapsed into something of a rupture. The ECOWAS committee, the ECOWAS states definitely are not happy with what is happening in these countries, and there's been a lot of exchanges in terms of in terms of what needs to be done in those countries. The principal thing is ECOWAS is insisting, ECOWAS, not just ECOWAS, but AU, the UN, and the EU, and other international bodies are requesting, in fact, demanding that there should be a restoration of democracy. Now, these countries, and the whole world actually is looking on ECOWAS to do that, because ECOWAS is the regional body that is more or less in charge of the area, and ECOWAS is looking onto Nigeria, because we have the border with Niger, and we also have the largest military contingent. If there's going to be a military intervention in Niger, definitely it has to, the contingent of the forces will come from Nigeria. A major part of the forces will come from Nigeria, and at the same time, the assets, the platforms that will be used in intervening there will come from Nigeria. So the whole world is looking on Nigeria to do it, but then there are a lot of issues in Nigeria that also will have to consider. And that's why, you see, you have to look at, the issue actually is compartmentalized into 4 issues. First, there is the ECOWAS interest. Then the second, there is the Nigerian interest. then there's a French interest, then there's American interest. Now, there has to be a convergence of all these four before we could have, you know, a move into Niger. Because if we do not have that...
Mr. Elesu, I like the fact that you just even brought that up. Yeah, I like the fact that you just even brought that up, because that's where my next conversation is. If Niger is saying that, you know, the French are taking their resources and taking it to fund their own economy, which is, of course, that is what they are also fighting for. Now, Ecowas on the other side seems to have a backup from the United States of America. So how do we solve all of this? That's to put it into that the foreign forces behind these kind of things that happen, because everybody has interest. So where is the interest of Nigerians?
Okay, as I said, there are four principal interests involved in what is happening in Niger. There is the Ecowas interest, which is to restore democracy and stability within the region and not allow coups to take place, because it will destabilize the region. Then there is the issue, the interest of Nigeria, which is that we have a long border with this country. We also have historical, social, and cultural relations. How do you get into this sort of quagmire without affecting yourself, affecting the people, 7 states that border and that have historical relations with this country? And also the collateral damage that may occur in the effort to intervene militarily, because Nigeria will be like the frontline state if you are going to have a military intervention in Niger. The staging point for the troops movement into Niger will be from Nigeria. The contingent, the heavy lifting actually will be done by Nigeria. The French, of course, they have commercial relations. They have relations with, they used to have, relations with Niger. They have also a lot of, interest in minerals there, mine there and all that. And there's historical relations there too. The Americans have drone base there for which they now deploy to use this not just within Niger, but also in the area, not just within the sub-region, but in Africa and beyond, Central Africa and beyond. So these are the 4 interests there. Now, if ECOWAS has to intervene in Niger, or Nigeria has to intervene in Niger, we have to be able to come to terms with the interests of the Americans and the interests of the French. And from what I know, the interests of the French and the interests of the Americans in Niger do not align. The interests of because the Americans, if you notice at the beginning of the issue, Americans were a bit reticent. They were not too gung-ho about going into Niger. In fact, it took them a long time to even, recognize it as a coup. They were dilly-dallying about whether, to consider it as a coup or not, because of their interests and the French did not converge. But at the same time now, we have a problem on our hands. Niger has become an elephant in the ECOWAS shop. We need to get them out because of the contagion that Niger could be, and Niger and the other countries could be, if something is not done. We cannot allow them to be able to be comfortable to the point where they will set up their own, alliance, and then, of course, threaten the entire democratic setup in the sub-region. But then, how do we go about it? How do we go about it? We've made threats, we've made pronouncements on cutting off electricity supply, cutting off, closing the borders, and also making the option of military intervention putting it across the table. But then, how long can we continue? We have reached a point of stalemate in those pronouncements, which now, has, within the time, it has emboldened these countries to try to say, well, since it's going to be difficult for these countries to come to, for this interest to come to an agreement on what to do, then we can just sit pretty and then continue. But in the meantime, let me inform you that a military regime always creates problems within itself. 80% of the military coups we have in Africa are military against military. So when you have a military, the longer a military stays in power, the more it has issues of instability within itself. So along the line, down the line, those countries are going to have instability issues even amongst themselves. In fact, there was an attempted coup sometime in Burkina Faso and in Mali. And I believe that in the case of Niger, that also is going to be a possibility. That's why they have now withdrawn all the military assets and all the military personnel they have along the borders, facing up to ISIS, facing the terrorists, back to Niamey, the capital, to protect the regime from being toppled or from internal, internal actions within the military. This is what a military regime in any part of the world creates. And that is why it is not a sustainable thing.
Mr. Eleso,
yes.
I want to get you right. When you said that the interest for an headway to come, for there to be an headway, that means that the interest of the America and the interest of French must be put into consideration. So where lies the interest of the people of Niger? Because they are the bone of contention. What is going to happen to them? Because everybody is fighting. Everybody wants something to take out from there. So where lies their own interest?
Definitely the interest of the people of Niger, and I would believe the interest of the people of West Africa as a whole, is to have democratic governments that are accountable to the people. In this case, what we have here in Niger and in these other countries that have had military juntas, what we have is a forcible truncation of the democratic will of the people for whatever reasons they have cited. And now they are being ruled by a conclave of military personnel who do not necessarily consult with them. And whereas there have been issues, there have been questions, there have been answers about need to take care of the national interests and all that. But that can be done through the democratic means. Because if you do not take the people's interests into consideration and you try to, you try to take only your own interest, the interest of the military into consideration, you run into a lot of problems. That is what is happening in Niger. The Niger people are the ones bearing the brunt of the sanctions by Ecowas. The Niger people are the ones being ruled by Fiat. The Niger people are the ones who do not have a say in what the government is doing on their behalf. Now, that is not right. That is not proper. They need to be able to say, yes, this is what we have, this is what we want, this is how we want it done, and this should be the way that it should be done. But then the military has taken over the government, and it is not even reflecting the wishes of the people. It's now into a situation whereby it's more interested in protecting itself in power than in even taking care of the issues of the people.
Mr. Elasu,
so in that respect...
Yeah, just one more moment, because I need to round up the conversation very soon. I wish I had more time. As we round up this conversation, what should ECOWAS do tomorrow? Because now it is very important that a decision must be taken, for the interest of the people of Niger. And what does this also mean, politically, economically, for ECOWAS and of course Africa as a whole, in taking a very good decision that will favor the people of Niger? What are we expecting? What do you think?
Well, I expect that when the ECOWAS heads of state meet tomorrow, they should make a firm declaration that the truncation of civilian democratic regimes in West Africa will not be tolerated. What I mean firm, I mean backed up with credible pronouncements of what to be done. And we must make sure that, and they must make sure that the incipient development of juntas trying to more or less desperate junta government trying to protect themselves at the expense of the people is not allowed. They must make it clear to the governments of Niger, government of Burkina Faso, government of Mali, government of Guinea, and to other militaries out there who are thinking about going the same way, that their action will not be tolerated and that democracy would ultimately triumph over military dictatorship. That is what the ECOWAS, I keep saying ECOWAS force has to do, and it has to go the next stage. Staying where they are now will not help anybody, will not help Niger people, will not help the people of West Africa. They must call on this government, they must call on all the support of the international community to say, look, we are determined to restore democracy in West Africa. We don't have the assets. We need you to help us, and we need you to come in strong on this. We need you to sort of collapse your interests in the interest of West Africa and the interest of democracy. That is what happened in Iraq and in other places where there was a resolve by governments around the world to stop this issue of aggressive behavior by countries that are stronger than their neighbors. We should do the same thing in West Africa and in Africa, as a matter of fact, because we cannot have military regimes intrinsically are not sustainable. They do not sustain themselves. Along the line, they cause instability within the country and within the sub-region. We must make it clear, and what is preventing us from doing, we don't have the assets, we must tell the people of the world that, look, we are resolved towards making sure that coups that are happening in Africa should not happen, and we need their support, materially, diplomatically, and all of it, so that we can now roll back this issue of trying to get juntas, truncating governments here and there, and then the dominoes will stop falling. Otherwise, we're going to wake up and it's going to continue to be a contagion. It's a cancer that must be removed from the body of Africa and the world.
All right. Thank you very much. Of course, everybody agrees that military should not be in governance. It's a known fact. Should not be in governance. And West Africa is not finding it funny at this particular time. I hope that when ECOWAS meets tomorrow, they will be able to take a decisive decision on that particular matter. Niger, most especially, for example, will be their focus. Thank you very much, Mr. Eliasu, for joining us on the show. I wish we had more time to talk more, but we'll get you back some other time to also talk some of these things. Thank you very much. So our next topic, after we come back from break, will be about COP28 and, of course, the economic policy of President Bola Tinubu. How does it favor the Nigerian people? We'll be back.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV station of the year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Lagos is the most visited state in Africa as the 5th largest economy on the continent. Covering the state and its government is no mean feat, it's a busy beat. We go beyond the curtain of tapes to traveling far into the deep.
I want to thank the Lagos State government for the healthcare facility.
To bring stories that cut across all spectrums.
A greater Lagos shall be ours.
We tell you stories that define our collective well-being as Lagosians. I'm Adedoja Salamadini. I live in Lagos, inside Lagos.
sales, sales! Embrace the holiday spirit with a shopping extravaganza at the TVC Women's Network First Sales Fair. Join us for an amazing opportunity to explore a wide array of products and services at festive discounts. Discover irresistible offers. Mark your calendar, December 15th to 17th, 2023. Venue, TVC Communications, 1 Continental Drive off CMD Road, Ikosiketu, Lagos. Time, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily. Immerse yourself in the festive vibe with a shopping spree featuring exciting games, stunning showcases, and live performances. Wrap up your shopping list with unmissable savings. For inquiries, call 0803-284-8509. Join us for an unforgettable holiday shopping adventure. This event is brought to you by TVC Communications.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world,
breaking down intricate economic and financial matters.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrencies.
We unveil and analyze complex policies of the CBN and other government parastatals as they affect your everyday life, keeping you a step ahead every time.
Okay, this is the Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate fact from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News. First with breaking news.
Nigeria is blessed with rich human natural resources. Of course, opportunities are abound, which can quickly be leveraged into new prosperity. But of course, how do Nigeria explore this diversity for a collective gain? With an eye on new think tank and the agricultural or digital economy, to mention a few. Many have said these human natural resources must be unearthed, nurtured, and cultivated to better the lives of Nigerians. At the weekend, just in this past week, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was at UAE, and of course it was the COP28, and interesting deals, of course, were signed. I remember the Siemens deal, and of course so many other things that were talked about at that COP28. The climate policy of Nigeria, how does it fit into what was discussed at that particular meeting, and the economic policy of President Bola Tinubu. How is it favoring the masses? Because that is what it should be. It should favor the masses. And of course, joining me on the show to talk about this is the presidential candidate of the Accord Party, Chris Imulema, Professor Chris Imulema. Thank you very much for joining me. So first, let me first ask you: were you surprised? You know, there was this noise on social media. How many Nigeria took 1,411 to COP, but the federal government later came out and said out of it was 422 that went there. But were you surprised? What's your reaction to that?
Okay. Again, thank you for having me on this show. We know climate matters is a very important one, but most especially to the advanced world. We must be very critical about that. Having 1,000 plus Nigerian delegates travel to Dubai to attend a climate change convention, to me, I wouldn't say I was surprised, but what I was more concerned about is why are we going? Do we know our standpoint? Do we know what we stand to benefit from this negotiation? Do we know where we ought to stand as a third world nation, undeveloped country coming up? Do we know what we need to go negotiate there? For me, I have my personal opinion about climate matter, about reduction of fossil fuel use, about the UNFCCC convention and the COPs, which are translated to the COP 28 we have today. I have my personal stand, and I believe those who are speaking for Africa and other third world nations are able to actually have a standpoint that benefits growing economy. You know, over the years we've had country and continent who had moved from locomotive economy now to a fourth industrial revolution economy. The Europe, the Americans, and the rest of them. Yes, they could freely talk about not use of fossil fuel. They could freely talk about running the economy because they've gotten to that stage. They have developed at the expense. People have all, these are debating topic which I, as an energy expert too, we see developed at the expense of other countries. No, now most likely part of African countries, especially Nigeria, let's look at our country, we still run largely on a fossil fuel. We have crude oil, which is generating about 80% of our revenue. Despite the fact that we care so much about the global ecosystem, we care so much about not extincting human and other animals that exist in the ecosystem, the greenhouse effect, the ozone layer depletion, issues that are being raised from the use of carbon emission and gas flaring. But we should also look at where we are as a nation and begin to attend those events with an understanding that this is where Africa is. Yes, we want to adhere to the convention of COP28, but we think that the money should come in. You know, if we ask Africans as continent, Nigeria as a country, to adhere to global practice when it comes to industrial operations, then we need that funds. We need to ensure that we're able to stabilize our economy while we are trying to protect the earth. Large part of Nigeria, you must know, those that stay in the rural community, which make chunk numbers of our population, there's no way they understand these economics. They don't know. You cannot tell them not to cook with firewood. You can let us bring down these things to how it applies to us. Yes, we want to align with the global world, but we are not there yet. So where is the fund coming from? The developed world had pledged to remit about $100 million annually to support third world nation, to making sure that, okay, whatever you do, we're able to give you carbon credits. Whatever you do, we're able to support you so that you do not further endanger the ecosystem. But that must be balanced. For Africa, those who are traveling, I'm not concerned about the numbers of people. What I'm concerned about is what knowledge do they have? What are they going to speak there? Are they just going to attend the conference, enjoy themselves, and come back to where we are? That is my major concern.
You talked about some issues that are already written down and which has to boil down to the people who went there, what exactly were they there for, you know, but there was already a breakdown on what they went there for. And I also want us to look at, when you talk about green economy, Nigeria is not yet there. I remember that the president, even before he became the president, I remember one of the forum where he was talking about, you know, the West coming to Africa to take from them in terms of that, then they must be able to give back, you know. And I think that's one of the focal points when he went to COP. But let's look at how do we begin to harness this green economy for Nigeria. Is something that we can't make enough revenue from it. The Western country are already doing that, and that was a major focus at COP. What do we do to get into that level?
Yes, we must, but we must be very critical about it. We are blessed with mineral resources. We have the crude oil, we have the coal. Yes, looking at the green economy, total adoption of green economy means total abandonment of some of the resources that we have. So how do we balance that? So if you are going to ask us to abandon what we have, which we need at our present state to develop to where you are, you did that years, 100, 200 years ago.
Exactly.
We are developing now because we want to talk about development is stage by stage. You know, when we look at theories all over the world, there were times that even the American world was just a locomotive economy. They worked through by burning coal before crude oil was discovered in Pennsylvania many years ago, and they have used this energy to develop. So when you talk about global warming, ozone layer depletion, greenhouse gases, these were majorly caused by the development that have been achieved by this part of the world. Yes, we want to adopt the green economy. It is very good for the economy. But the common man who needs food daily, who wants to provide employment for people, might not know how to interpret that. That's why we talk about funding. Then there must be a cushion effect. if you want the African economy, the third world nation, to totally embrace this. The woman in the village, we need to explain to her, you need to stop burning firewood. We need to give you gas. How do you do that? Can she afford to get gas? So there must be subsidy, there must be provision for that. So if you are looking at this, not just paper, we must look at the practicality in the implementation of it. Greenhouse economy is the best when it comes to protecting our world. The earth needs to be protected. We need to be friends of the earth. But again, survival is still very paramount to us. So that balancing is very key. So when we talk about carbon credit, where companies are being given incentive, loans, financial support based on the adoption of green activities in their local operations. We've seen that, but how practicable has that been in African world? It's even more practicable in other countries where they've already in a way aligned to the green economy. For us in Africa, government needs to do a lot of things for it to be realistic. For example, we still have a country where generation of power is still very difficult. People still resort to the use of their personal generator and the rest of them. This also so there's a whole lot of things that must be done. It's not just talking about it, but it's about making sure that things that are needed to facilitate the acceptance of total greenhouse economy is put in place. It's not just by government running out solar panels, saying we're going to. No, there's a lot of things that must be done. First, like I said, is the finance. The fund must come into third world nation. The carbon credit must be totally harnessed, and it must be practicable. And the sincerity of the white, the center of the West, to ensure that Africa enjoy. And we should not see this as a strategy, I'm sorry to say, to also dampen the development of the third world nation.
You know, you talked about power, and that also brings me to, one of the things that the president did while he was at COP, to sign the Siemens deal, which the previous administration, President Muhammadu Buhari, had started. He only complete one part of it, which is the transmission part of it. That's what he did. So what it simply means is that Nigeria will be able to get, by the time Siemens come in fully with their own infrastructure, build an economy, according to the federal government, Nigerians will be able to get these things in their houses. How realistic do you think this is? Like you said, the man in the woman in
the village, yes, wants to know. So basically, it's not, yes, Siemens, good move by the government, good contract, good sign. We need it to actually drive our economy. But beyond that, recently, even before the last administration left, they actually liberalized power generation. Now, companies could get license to generate power. The NERC now have that mandate to also allow public interest in power generation. Fine, fantastic. We want to see this thing practical. We want to see this thing working. I can tell you in few weeks or few months before now, a lot of companies had applied. But check out how many companies was given the license. You still see a lot of bureaucratic bottlenecks in those policies that have been adjusted. If we must truly, the president is doing his best, but there's a lot of over-oiling we must do in the civil service, in the public service, to ensure that policies that are drafted, policies that are adjusted, becomes easily practicable and implemented. And that has to do with the sincerity of the people. The over-oiling of that sector that needs to go through. Siemens is coming. We pray and we will be wishing them very well to come into Nigeria and do what. But what about other Nigerians? They might not be investing as much as Siemens will be investing, but their little contribution put together will also help that sector. So at the end of the day, we don't have a sector that is being monopolized, because that is what we want to fight against. There's a lot of Nigerians in Nigeria who are the very first primary investor to Nigeria economy. How do we encourage them to also get into this opportunity? There's a lot of people who also want to. So we need to have a sincere process that makes a common man who knows nobody, who have the investment and the capacity to invest, who have the virtuosi and the knowledge to make things happen, also get into this opportunity and work with the government and make a better economy. So fantastic what has happened with Siemens, but let us come down to Nigerian investors. Nigerians are the first investor to Nigerian economy. Nigerians are the first people that believe in Nigeria itself. Yes, we need the international community to also come in, very well, but we need to start looking at this practical approach, sincere approach. Once there's a policy rejig, let us have a sincere approach so that we don't just have it on paper and we don't have it on ground. The President Mohamed Buhari, who had initiated a contract with CMS to Siemens for transmission. Transmission line is very, very, very important because the transmission by itself has not been what's it called given out. Let me use that word. That is not a more professional word, but let me just use that word. No matter how much we're going to generate, if the transmission line is not there to transmit what is generated for distribution, you have what is called blackouts. That is when we always would hear that there is the national grid has collapsed because you are now generating more than what can be transmitted. So I think these should go together, and I know maybe those in charge are looking at those parameters. And most importantly, we have 45 million households. What we need in Nigeria to service Nigeria is about 100,000 megawatts. That is the estimation. Today we have been able to produce 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts. We still have a long way to go. Yes, Siemens should come in, but we still need more Nigerians in Nigeria, more international communities to come in. And lastly, before, is that we need to have an economy that will drive business in Nigeria. We love what the president is doing and the team traveling everywhere to get investors attracted to Nigeria. But there's a homework we need to do. Let's get our home ready. No matter how much we preach about our economy, when they come in and they find a situation which common Nigerians, businessmen are facing, that by itself, and we have a lot of companies in Nigeria who are even folding up, leaving. So why can't we even find a way to get those ones who have spent 50 years in Nigeria living, get them to stay? You get, so there's a whole lot of work we must do. For me, going abroad to entice, to toast investors is good, but primarily we must begin to look at those things that is encouraging businesses in Nigeria, discouraging them from not working to begin to work. One of them is, after rejigging and overhauling policies, we must make sure that there is a practical steps to have them implementable in Nigeria.
I might quite agree with you. I was at the Heart of Technology, the digital economy for the program that was organized in Lagos State by the Lagos State government. While talking to some of the tech experts there, one of their major challenges is the policies that is put in place for them to thrive. How do we go forward from, just normal documents to implementation? Secondly, what are the things that you have noticed about this President Bola Ahmed Tinubu economic policy that you think that, if Nigerians are able to tap into it, it can be favored? Or do you think that some of those things need to be rejigged for Nigerians, for you to favor Nigerians? Okay.
Number one, I think we've seen a lot of policies reformed happen under his administration, but most importantly is the human character reform. No matter, we're looking at the budget, for example, great budget. One of the things I saw in that budget was, I saw, focused. The budget was not addressing everything, but I think from what, I haven't studied the budget, what I feel they have understand is that this budget, we don't have enough money. At this level, we are still budgeting 27 or 26 trillion.
27.53.
Yes, it's still, look at the Nigeria economy is huge. Compare Nigeria to other countries that have the same market we have. Look at what they do. Look at, for example, in education. We are budgeting, let me convert to dollar, because when you mention 27% trillion naira value by today is virtually, I'm sorry to say, not too, it's not there internationally. We have a challenge with our naira. So look at education.
But that's why the president is also saying that he's going to peg it at 750 per dollar. I think so, if I'm correct.
Yeah, even if he's pegging, let's look at what is allocated to education. We are a country of 200 million people above, and we have budgeted about $1 billion to education. A country like South Africa that have less population, less people, less school, its budget for education is far more than $1 billion. And we have more challenge here when it comes to our educational system. What we have a problem with generation of funds in Nigeria. We still generate very little compared to the capacity that Nigeria could have. Let me give an example, and maybe, I don't know who is watching. Ghana, for example, Nigerians, I'm talking about, let's look at education and the budget that is given to education. Nigerians studying in Ghana, as of last year by World Bank Index, says that Nigerian students in Ghana alone contribute about $500 million a year to Ghana economy, half of the budget to education. School fees of Nigerians that study in the UK alone for 2022 is more than the budget of Nigeria to Nigeria education. Can't we begin to think as Nigerians, as people, how then do we ensure that we are next? Let me tell you, one of the major things that is stressing our forests is not even commodity need, because there have been Nigerians that have been moving out to search for commodity. One of the major things that have been stressing our forest is the need to pay school fees abroad. I can tell you that. We are not looking at that. My simple advice to government, if they listen, government can talk to foreign schools to begin to have local accounts in Nigeria, where Nigerians who are abroad can pay school fees into their local account. In that way, we will save a lot of foreign flight. I'm telling you, people, we need to be creative at this point. You might not really know, but we need to be creative at this point. I know those listening can begin to look at this simple idea. See how, because we must begin to work as a country to reduce flow of our local economy, the need of foreign currency out of Nigeria. That is what, and one of the major things I can tell you. If you look at what is happening, I might be a little bit diverting from what we are talking, but I'm still going to come back. Yeah. If you look at what some other countries have done to Nigeria, they are feasting on our economic vulnerability. Countries, which I would not want to mention name, have opened visa windows, and majorly for students, because they know that they've even actually closed visa window for visitors and every other category. The only visa window they've opened for Nigeria is student visa window. You all know those countries. And what they do with that visa window is that they use that visa window to mop up Nigerian currency out. Nigeria must counter-react to it by making sure that this country, there are some schools abroad that have 80% of their student Nigerians. Check how they graduate. We need to begin to look at this, and we need to begin to form the counter policies that will not just discourage Nigerians from going. Yes, Nigeria have the right to seek for international education, but again, save our economy. So those are part of the
Thank you very much. Our time is up. Thank you very much for coming. Of course, it's a conversation that will still continue on what the president is doing economically to better the lives of Nigerians. Thank you, Professor Chris Emilamo, presidential candidate of the Accord Party, joining us in the studio to discuss some of the things happening in the world of governance, most especially the COP, and some of the policies of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Thank you. My name is Ademola Lawrence. Join us for a repeat by 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. We'll join you next week again, where we'll bring you stories happening in the world of politics and governance.
In the month of December, the 1st is World AIDS Day, while the 2nd of December is International Day for the Abolition of Slavery. On the 3rd is International Day of Persons with Disabilities. On the 4th of December, attention shifts as the day is dedicated to World Wildlife Conservation. The 7th is International Civil Aviation Day, and on the 9th is International Anti-Corruption Day. On the 10th is Human Rights Day, and on the 21st is World Basketball Day. 25th is Christmas Day, when Christians celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. The day after is Boxing Day, which is on the 26th, and on the 31st is New Year's Eve. Brace yourself and tune in to TVC News for in-depth reporting and analysis on these days. TVC News, first with breaking news.
The task of the leaders is to get their people from where they are to where they've not been. How do we hold our leaders accountable in the business of lawmaking and representation?
The mandate that you have given to us is not abuse in any way.
The primary purpose of government is to ensure the welfare and security of the Nigerian people.
The Constituency project had noble intentions, and they still remain the most veritable tool.
Do they really know their representatives at the states and national assemblies?
Our people, they don't have water, they are suffering. They only drink water from where rain fall.
For the current one, the 10th assembly, I don't really know who is in charge.
From the mountaintops to the deepest valleys, we're ready to go an extra mile just to show Nigerian your constituency project. Know your representative with Maria, bridging the visible gap.
Sometimes it's the story that calls. At other times, the people just want to be heard.
School, I need students, but I need teachers.
Can't continue like this.
Their voices re-echoing through time itself.
We haven't done anything. If the tide is high, everybody run for safety.
Their tears leave a sweet, sour taste for all their demands. A familiar call beckoning for change. In our world, no one expects a disaster to happen. But when it does, we'll be there to x-ray all sides, from the east to the west, north and south. Community Forum will examine the oddities and challenges to economic development, as well as issues yearning for government intervention. Watch fresh episodes of Community Forum on Sundays by 9:30 p.m. only on TVC News.
At TVC News, wherever the big news story is happening, we're geared up to break it. TVC News, first with breaking news.
It is time for consolidation of recovery efforts in Borno State, devastated by years of insurgency and terror. From security to education, health, agriculture, infrastructure and housing, every sector has continued to bear the stamp of Zulum's visionary leadership. Join us on Borno Restoration as we try, showcase and analyze developmental strides of Professor Babagana Zulum and his overwhelming care for the vulnerable. Borno Restoration on TVC News every Saturday at 8 p.m. It's time to restore.
Politics is defined as getting what, where, when, and how. But in the mix, many things come to play to shape the political fortune of any country.
Mr. Honorable Minister,
that's how you misinform the public.
From the political actors to the electorate, campaign to voting, from debates to policy decisions, big events happen to engage us in constant conversation.
That's what we're looking for. Not some people who are talking about ethnicity. No.
Who is on your mind?
Don't worry.
Join me every day on Politics Tonight, where we dissect issues that shape our political destiny. Politics Tonight, weekdays on TVC News.
Hello and thanks for joining us on The World Now. We begin with the war between Israel and Hamas, which is now in its 10th week. Israeli troops have continued their assault on the southern Gaza city of Khan Yunis. There are reports of house-to-house fighting in the city. Most of the population have also fled to coastal areas further south to Rafah. This is despite race for a total ceasefire by concerned countries and the United Nations. We have details in this report.
The United States vetoed a UN Security Council resolution on Friday for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The vote came after UN Chief Antonio Guterres warned of a high risk of the collapse of the humanitarian support system that could lead to dire consequences in the embattled enclave.
As long as Hamas clings to its ideology of destruction, any ceasefire is at best temporary and is certainly not peace. And any ceasefire that leaves Hamas in control of Gaza would deny Palestinian civilians the chance to build something better for themselves. For that reason, although the United States strongly supports a durable peace in which both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security, we do not support this resolution's call for an unsustainable ceasefire that will only plant the seeds for the next war.
During the debate, the Palestinian ambassador cited the thousands killed or injured in Israel's assault on Gaza, saying enough is enough, while Israel's envoy said a ceasefire would only extend the war and that the only option for peace was to eliminate Hamas.
You have to be in favor of an immediate ceasefire. When you refuse to call for a ceasefire, you are refusing to call for the only thing that can put an end to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. The law should be upheld for everyone and against anyone.
Israel's defensive war against Hamas, a designated terrorist organization, was the catalyst for activating Article 99. The irony is that regional stability and the security of both Israelis and Gazans can only be achieved once Hamas is eliminated.
13 countries were in favor of the resolution, while the United States vetoed and the UK abstained. At least 97 other countries joined in the effort, co-sponsoring the United Arab Emirates drafted bill. Israel says men in Gaza seen in images of a mass detention by the Israeli military were suspected terrorists, while Hamas claimed Israel of targeting a group of displaced Palestinian civilians. The Secretary General went before the Security Council to call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza to avert a humanitarian catastrophe that could have ramifications for peace and security in the region and beyond, 2 days after he invoked Article 99 of the United Nations Charter.
I call for their immediate and unconditional release, as well as their humane treatment and visits from the international community of the Red Cross until they are freed. International humanitarian law cannot be applied selectively. It is binding on all parties equally at all times, and the obligation to observe it does not depend on reciprocity.
The Article 99 gives the Secretary General the remit to bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter which, in his opinion, may threaten the maintenance of international peace and security. And after Mr. Guterres took this rare move, Israel's foreign minister accused the United Nations chief of siding with Hamas. Hamas, on the other hand, condemned the United States' decision to veto the Gaza ceasefire draft resolution, describing it as an immoral and inhumane position. Now, describing the disastrous situation in the Gaza Strip 2 months after the Israeli bombardment started on the Palestinian enclave, the UN Health Agency, the WHO, says civilization is about to break down as intense Israeli bombardment of Gaza continues to hinder urgently needed aid operations.
Civilization is about to break down. Health workers need to flee and take care of themselves on top of it. They don't have food, they don't have water to continue working. Patients are bleeding on the floor. Trauma yards resemble battlefields, literally. This must end. This callousness must end. We need a ceasefire, and we need it now.
And the World Food Programme says it is deeply concerned about the impact of the conflict on levels of hunger. It says the need for lasting peace has never been greater, especially if the worst effects of food insecurity are to be averted.
About half of the population in Gaza are starving, and the needs that we are meeting is really nothing. The humanitarian operation is collapsing. With the chaos, with this active fighting, it's not possible to do the work that is needed to meet these massive needs.
According to the Ministry of Health in Gaza, between the 7th of October and 7th of December afternoon, at least 17,177 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. About 70% of them are said to be women and children, and 46,000 others are reportedly injured. Many more are missing, presumably under the rubble, waiting rescue or recovery.
And away from the war between Israel and Hamas to the one between Russia and Ukraine, Olena Zelenska has warned that Ukrainians are in mortal danger of being left to die if Western countries do not continue their financial support. Ukraine's First Lady outcry is coming a day after Republican senators in the United States blocked a key aid bill. It would have provided more than $60 billion worth of support to Ukraine. Speaking hours after a Russian missile attack, she said if the world gets tired, they will simply let Ukrainians die. The White House has warned that U.S. funds for Ukraine could soon run out, but Republicans have held up a deal to authorize more assistance. They're also seeking to secure compromises from President Joe Biden and Democrats in Congress on funding for U.S. other measures in exchange for their support. Still on the war, Ukrainian society has answered with a resounding no to whether Ukraine should hold a presidential election next March when Volodymyr Zelensky's term ends. Since February 2022, Ukraine has faced a full-scale Russian invasion that has seen its eastern territories occupied. The conflict triggered Ukraine's martial law, which temporarily suspends elections. But while the Ukrainian public has expressed widespread support for the postponement, some politicians, both domestic and foreign, have questioned whether it contradicts the country's democratic ideals. Even members of President Zelensky's own government have signaled an openness to the prospect of holding a vote. Still, when Kyiv International Institute of Sociology held a nationwide poll in October, 8 out of 10 respondents said presidential and parliamentary elections should be postponed until after the war is over. Civil society groups have also backed that view. In September, 100 non-governmental organizations, both Ukrainian and multinational, signed a statement against holding wartime elections. And Ukraine's warring partner, Russia, on the other hand, will hold a presidential election in 2024, and President Vladimir Putin says he will run for president again, a move that will allow the former KGB spy to stay in power until at least 2030. He's already served as president for longer than any other rule of Russia since Joseph Stalin. The election is a formality. Mr. Putin has the support of the state-run media, and almost no mainstream public dissent. Mr. Putin will bid for his fifth presidential term of the election set to take place on March 17, 2024, as he aims to solidify his continuous hold on power as head of state or prime minister for more than 2 decades. Amidst this power dynamic, woman Ekaterina Dostova is challenging President Putin despite the inherent risk. With a following of 120,000 on the internet, Ms. Dostova, a local politician with no prior national experience, is a fresh face from obscurity. She is a single mother of 3 who manages her campaign from a humble 2-room home, fighting against the tide without financial support or help. Her website declares a bold stand against Putinism, critiquing the country's destructive track in the last decade. Well, for more on the rejection of the wartime election in Ukraine and President Putin's decision to contest again, I have joining me via Zoom Chairman, Nigerian on the diaspora, Russia, Dr. Godwin Ibe, joining me live from Moscow. Good to have you join us on The World Now. I believe the conflict between both warring nations triggered Ukraine's martial law, which temporarily suspends elections. But what do you say about speculations of an election next year amidst the war?
First of all, I would like to say that there is a mischaracterization that the media is any more controlled in Russia than it is controlled elsewhere. First of all, as all media companies have sponsors, and obviously they have to do mostly what their sponsors want. There are also alternate media in Russia. For example, you can find many on Telegram, you can find on other social media, which they government, frankly, does not have the capability to control. And then you can assess the opinion of Russians over there. You wouldn't find channels that have millions of subscribers from Russia supporting government policies if they are if they really do not support the government policy. They wouldn't be there. They wouldn't want to hear the latest news of what's going on, for example, in the conflict.